Welcome, dear listener, to Jade Fox Tales, where ancient myths become the dreams into which you softly descend. I am most grateful for your company this evening and for the quiet moment you have chosen to spend here. Tonight, we journey to the quiet fields of old Vietnam, where the earth lay waiting beneath an empty sky, and a humble farmer looked upward in hope for long-awaited rain. It is a tale of patience, of quiet devotion, and of the unseen forces that sometimes answer to those who endure with care and perseverance. For in these old stories, the balance of the natural world is seldom without meaning, and even the smallest voice, raised with sincerity, may be heard beyond what can be seen. You need not follow each word too closely. Should your thoughts begin to wander, you may let them do so. And if sleep should find you before the tale has reached its end, you may welcome it without concern. This story will continue, whether heard or not, as the rains in their own time return gently to the waiting earth. Before we begin, let us allow the day to fall gently away. Take a slow breath in and let it go again unhurried. There is no need to guide the breath, only to notice its quiet rhythm. The world beyond this moment may wait. For now, there is nowhere you must be, and nothing that requires your attention. And so, in this quiet interval, we turn gently towards tonight's tale, the story of a humble farmer and of the rain that came at last in answer to patience and quiet faith. And now, dear listener, let the body rest, let the mind grow still, and allow yourself to drift as the story begins. In a quiet village of ancient Vietnam, where emerald rice fields once shimmered like polished jade beneath the sun, there came a season when the heavens grew silent. The rains did not arrive. At first, the absence was scarcely remarked upon. A day passed, then another, beneath an unbroken sky of pale and indifferent blue. Farmers continued their labors, trusting in the ancient rhythm that had governed seeds and harvests in their forefathers first pressed grain into fertile soil. But days lengthened. The wind carried dust instead of mist. The tender shoots of rice, which should have stood bright and hopeful, bowed weakly in earth that hardened with each relentless noon. Among the villagers there lived a farmer of modest means, neither young nor yet burdened by great age. His hands were strong from years of tending the fields. His back bore the quiet testimony of labor faithfully formed. Each morning he walked the narrow ridges between his paddies and knelt to touch the soil. It crumbled beneath his fingers. He lifted his gaze towards the sky. It offered no reply. The elders spoke in subdued tones of seasons long past, when drought had visited the valley. They called tales of a rain god, a celestial keeper of clouds who governed the monsoon winds and commanded the swelling of rivers. Some said the deity resided beyond the highest mountains. Others believed he moved unseen within the very vapor of the air. Yet all agreed upon one matter. The rain god did not answer to anger. He answered to balance. As the weeks pressed onward and the river thinned to a languid breath, worry settled like a weight upon every household. Livestock grew restless. Wells sank lower. Mothers measured grain with increasing care. Still, the sky remained vast and unmoved. One evening, as twilight cast long shadows across the cracked fields, the farmer stood alone at the edge of his land. In the distance, mountains rose faint and blue against the horizon, guardians of a world older than drought, older even than memory. He removed his conical hat and held it at his side. "I've labored faithfully," he said softly, though no human ear stood near. "If fault lies with me, let it be shown. If not, grant us rain." The air stirred only faintly. No cloud gathered. Yet as darkness settled, a thought took root within his heart, not born of desperation, but of resolve. If the rain god would not descend unbidden, perhaps he must be sought. The elders had long spoken of a shrine hidden beyond the valley, on a hill where stone steps wound upwards through ancient banyan trees. There, it was said, offerings might be made not of gold nor of incense alone, but of sincerity. The farmer returned to his dwelling and prepared a simple bundle, a measure of rice from his dwindling store, a clay bowl of clear water, and a small carving of wood shaped by his own hand, humble tokens of gratitude rather than petition. At dawn he would depart, for though the sky had withheld its mercy, it would not withhold his faith. And far above, beyond the veil of mortal sight, something ancient and watchful regarded the valley below, neither indifferent nor yet persuaded. The heavens were silent, but they were not unaware. At first light, before even the rooster had found their voice, the farmer set forth from his dwelling. A pale mist lingered low upon the valley floor, though it carried no promise of rain. The rice fields lay wan and brittle behind him, their once lustrous green surrendered to a weary yellow. He did not look back long. To gaze too heavily upon hardship is to give it dominion over the heart. The path towards the hill was seldom travelled. It wound between grooves of bamboo and over small stones long warmed by seasons past. As he ascended, the air grew cooler, touched by faint currents descending from distant highlands. Above him rose the older earth, ancient hills that had stood long before valleys were raised in the plains of Vietnam. Their slopes bore banyan trees, whose roots coiled like the fingers of time itself. By midday he reached the stone steps of which the elders had spoken. They were narrow and weather-worn, softened by moss and memory. Each step seemed less a structure built by hand than a continuation of the hill's own body. The farmer paused at their base and bowed, not in superstition, but in acknowledgement. He climbed slowly, not from fatigue alone, though the sun pressed firmly upon his back, but from a growing awareness that he approached something not to be hurried. At length he came upon the shrine. It stood modestly beneath the sheltering branches of an immense banyan, its wooden beams darkened by years of wind and sun. Offerings lay upon its small altar, some recent, others faded by time, dried flowers, a string of beads, bowls long emptied of incense ash. The farmer knelt. He placed his measure of rice before the shrine, and then the bowl of water, clear and unspilled despite the journey. Last of all, he set down the small carving he had fashioned, a cloud cradling a single droplet, shaped not by skillful artistry, but by patient hands. I bring no demand, he said softly, only acknowledgement. The wind moved gently through the banyan leaves, their long tendrils whispering against one another like the hushed conversation. I have tilled the earth, he continued. I have sown with care. If the drought be a lesson, let me learn it. If it be a trial, grant me endurance. But if rain may yet fall, let it fall not for me alone, but for all who depend upon it. Silence followed, not an empty silence, but a listening one. The farmer remained kneeling long after his words had faded. He felt no immediate change, no stirring of clouds, nor rumble of distant thunder. The sky above the canopy remained pale and white. Yet something subtle shifted. The air thickened slightly, a slow drawing breath. A coolness passed briefly across his brow. He did not dare to lift his eyes at once. When he did, he perceived no figure standing before him, no radiant apparition clothed in storm and lightning. Instead, he heard a voice. It did not descend from the sky, nor echo from the shrine. It seemed to arise from the space between wind and leaf, between breath and thought. You speak without accusation. The farmer bowed lower. I speak as one who depends, he replied. The valley has grown impatient. The voice continued, calm and resonant. Many curse the sky, few examine the soil. The farmer felt a stirring of unease. The soil, he asked gently. For seasons past, said the unseen presence, the land has been pressed for greater yields. Fields have been expanded. Forest edges cut back. Rivers diverted beyond their natural course. The farmer thought of new paddies carved hastily into slopes, of trees felled to widen cultivation. He himself had taken only what was needed, yet he had not questioned the whole. The earth, the voice continued, requires rest as surely as a man. A hush followed, deep and contemplative. What must be done? The farmer asked. Return balance, came the reply. Restore what has been taken beyond measure. Let the land breathe, and the sky shall answer. The wind sailed. The air warmed once more. The presence withdrew as gently as mist dissolving beneath morning sun. The farmer remained kneeling, his heart neither elated nor despondent, but awakened. Rain would not fall by plea alone. It required change. He gathered his empty bowl and rose. The descent would carry him not merely back to the valley, but into the difficult labor of persuasion. For to ask men to yield their ambition is no small undertaking. Yet as he began his journey downward, a single cloud, small, hesitant, yet distinct, drifted across the otherwise vacant sky. It did not yet promise storm, but it was no longer empty. The farmer returned to the valley by late afternoon, the small cloud still wandering above as though uncertain of its purpose. The fields lay as he had left them, pale, brittle, and waiting. That evening he gathered the villagers beneath the shade of the largest tamarind tree near the river's thinning edge. Word had spread with ascent to the shrine, and many came not from belief, but from curiosity. He spoke plainly. The rain god has not withheld mercy without cause, he began. The earth has been pressed beyond its strength. Murmurs stirred among the gathered men. The drought is the sky's doing, one said sharply. What fault lies in sowing what land we possess? The farmer did not raise his voice. None, when it is done with balance, he replied. But in recent seasons, forests were cleared too swiftly. The river was drawn into channels deeper than it wished to flow. You have asked the soil for abundance without granting it rest. Silence followed, for though pride resisted, memory did not. They recalled how fields had been extended farther up the hills, how young trees had been cut before their roots grew strong, how yields had indeed grown for a time. the eldest woman among them, whose hands bore the mark of decades in the paddies, nodded slowly. "In my mother's day," she said, "one field lay fallow each year. It was understood." Another voice, quieter now, added, "We feared falling behind neighboring valleys." The farmer inclined his head. "And so we have fallen behind ourselves." The words settled heavily. It was no small matter to surrender cultivated land, even for a season. Grain stores were already thin, yet the farmer spoke not of loss, but of restoration. "If the earth is permitted to recover," he said, "the sky may do the same." After long discussion, some reluctant, some resolved, an agreement was reached. A portion of the newly claimed hillside fields would be abandoned for the season. Saplings would be replanted where trees had been taken too freely. The river's diversion would be partially undone, allowing water to return to its natural course. The labor required was not light. For several days, the villagers worked not to expand, but to restore. Young men carried seedlings to the slopes. Women reshaped channels so the river might meander as once it had. Children pressed small plants into the softened earth near the paddies. The sun still shone fiercely. The air remained dry, yet something within the valley shifted. The land, once strained and overworked, seemed to exhale. On the third evening, as the villagers concluded their toil, a wind arose from the east, cooler than any felt in weeks. The farmer stood at the edge of his field and looked upward. Clouds gathered, not hastily, nor in violent formation, but steadily, layer upon layer, as though drawn together by unseen hands. A low rumble rolled across the hills, not harsh, not threatening, but ancient. The first drop fell upon his cheek. It was as light as breath. Then another struck the dust at his feet, darkening the soil in a small, perfect circle. Across the valley, faces lifted, children laughed, the elders closed their eyes. Rain descended, gentle at first, then fuller, yet never fierce. It did not lash the earth, it nourished it. sank into the soil with quiet gratitude. The river stirred and widened. The fields drank deeply, and in the distant hills, beyond sight but not beyond presence, something watched. The farmer returned once more to the shrine days later, though this time he carried no plea. He knelt beneath the banyan and spoke only this: "We have remembered." The wind moved softly through the leaves. A presence brushed the edge of his awareness, calm, neither triumphant nor indulgent. The sky answers balance, came the familiar voice. The farmer bowed. He understood now that rain was not reward, nor drought mere punishment. They were responses, part of a greater harmony that required both humility and care. When he descended the hill once more, the valley shimmered green beneath new growth. The drought had not vanished without lesson, and the lesson would endure if remembrance endured with it. High above, clouds drifted in measured grace across the evening sky. The rain god had not been conquered, nor appeased. He had been acknowledged, and the earth, given rest, had answered in kind. The valley did not transform in a single night. Rain continued in measured intervals, sometimes abundant, sometimes withheld, yet never again in the cruel excess of silence that at once gripped the land. The river found its older path and seemed content there, widening with quiet dignity through the restored bank. The replanted hillsides began, slowly, to clothe themselves in green. Tender shoots rose where saplings had been set. Birds returned first in cautious numbers, then in cheerful confidence. The air itself felt altered, not merely cooled by rainfall, but steadied by restraint. The farmer resumed his daily labor, though his manner bore a subtle change. He no longer regarded the sky as an adversary to be petitioned, nor as a benefactor to be praised only in times of favor. He saw in it a partner, distant, powerful, yet responsive to balance. One evening, as dusk gathered in soft violet tones across the paddies, he stood upon the ridge between fields and observed the water glimmering beneath the fading light. Children's laughter carried across the valley. Smoke rose gently from cooking fires. Life had returned, yet it had returned tempered. The farmer removed his conical hat and bowed slightly towards the hills where the shrine stood hidden beneath ancient banyan roots. "I ask for rain," he murmured, but received understanding. A wind moved lightly across the water, setting faint ripples dancing towards the banks. From within the drifting clouds above, a distant murmur of thunder rolled, not as warning, but as remembrance. No form appeared before him, no radiant figure descended in splendor, and yet, in that quiet moment, he felt again the presence he had known upon the hill, vast, watchful, neither stern nor indulgent. "You have kept balance," the voice seemed to echo within his thoughts, "and we shall strive to keep it," he answered. Seasons passed. Each year thereafter, one portion of the land was left to follow. Forest edges were respected. The river was permitted its wandering course. The valley prospered, not extravagantly, but sufficiently, and when rains came, they were welcomed not with desperate relief, but with steady gratitude. In time, the farmer grew older. His hair silvered like mist upon morning water. His steps slowed along the narrow ridges between paddies. Yet he remained faithful to his quiet observances. On the final evening of his life, as clouds gathered gently above the valley, he sat upon a low wooden stool before his home and listened to the first drops strike the earth. They fell in soft succession, patient, measured, kind. He closed his eyes. The rain continued. High above the hills of Vietnam, clouds drifted in tranquil procession, guided by a wisdom older than memory. The rain god required no temples of gold, no fearful devotion, only balance, only remembrance. And so, dear listener, when next you hear rain against your window, let it not be mere sound. Let it be a reminder that the earth breathes, that the sky responds, and that harmony, once restored, must be tended as faithfully as any field. The valley slept beneath gentle rainfall, and all was well.